This is Maggie Rivas Rodriguez. Today is March the 10th, the year 2001. I'm interviewing Judge Armendariz. Albert Armendariz for the U.S. Latino and Latina World War II Oral History Project. We're sitting in Judge Armendariz's office in El Paso, Texas. And Judge Armendariz, thank you so much for taking the time to be interviewed for our project. I'm going to start off just talking a little bit about your early life, and then we're going to the purpose of this project is to get a little bit about what your life was before the war, during the war, and after the war.
All right.
One of the reasons that we think it's so important to interview you, of course, is because of your efforts in civil rights.
Right.
And so we want to make sure and focus on that. I just want to ask you a question about your earpiece.
Right.
Why are you wearing that?
Well, I have been trying some. I have lost my hearing, and it didn't happen all of a sudden, but it got worse all of a sudden. And I have had to. I've been trying to fit some earpieces, and I don't seem to be able to take them. And I read this at one of the stores that sells this stuff equipment, and I went and got it, and it's perfect now. I can hear, and especially for court, because now I can. That's why I'm wearing the headpiece, because if I take it out, I can't hear your questions, and I can't answer, and I want to answer them. So I have a headpiece because of that.
So how much did this headpiece cost you?
I'm sorry?
How much did it cost you?
This one cost me 60 cents, and the last pair of things that didn't work cost me $1,800 each. And this one cost me $60. And I bought it at Radio Shack. And I recommend, especially for long, because, for instance, in court, I haven't gone to court with it yet, but I know that if I do this, I'm going to be able to hear the judge. And the other day I was in court, I couldn't hear the judge, and he wasn't too happy about it. But I said, well, life is like that. I think he suggested that I retire. It was time that I retire. But he's not going to tell me, nobody's going to tell me when to retire. I'm going to retire when I want to retire.
Well, let me just ask you a little bit about that, because when we were setting up the interview, you told me that you were, every weekend just about, you go out and you have clients that live outside of El Paso. Tell me about that.
Right. I have, the fact is, I do a lot of, we do immigration work. And my son Albert doesn't like to travel. And we have a lot of people that can't cross a border checking point because they're illegal status, and our job is to legalize their status. That's what we're doing. So we usually go, and it's like Muhammad in the mountain. If Muhammad can't come to the mountain has to come to Muhammad. And we go and see people, and my present wife, Mari, is my driver. And she drives me, and we go from here generally to, we stop in Pecos, we go to Monahans, we go to Odessa, then we go to Kermit and other little towns around there, and we go to Midland. And sometimes we go up to New Mexico. We have some people in New Mexico. And it's all immigration work that can't come to you. And we have quite an extensive practice in immigration. A lot of it is pro bono, a very large point of it, because people can't pay, or almost pro bono because they can pay small sums. But we keep very, very busy and have a very busy life with that. And both Albert and I enjoy the practice. And I smile now because I just remember one I won 2 weeks ago. It was a U.S. citizenship case through derivation. A lot of people don't know that the United States Code has forever, as far as I remember, had sanguinal citizenship. In other words, through bloodline. And you get a person who has committed a crime and is going to be deported. And this one was particularly important because he had 9 U.S. citizen children, and they were going to be without children and without father. So I urged citizenship on him through his mother. The judge here denied it, and I appealed it to the Board of Immigration Appeals, and the board ruled in my favor just 2 weeks ago.
Through his mother?
Right. And I walked him out of the camp where this man had withstood 9 months because the law is so cruel that they don't allow him to bond out to protect, to support his children while he's waiting for this litigation. He was ineligible for a bond, and he stuck to it. I had 7 in the same position. 6 of them gave up and went to Mexico. He's the only one that stayed, and I won his case. And I feel very good about it. But that's the type of work that we do. We right now we're fighting cases involving DWI in Texas, in Oklahoma, and another state. And we seem to have just won a victory with the Fifth Circuit that may save a lot of people from deportation. Some of these happened 10, 15, 20 years ago. They're deporting people who did this have sobered up and become responsible citizens, and they pick them up 15, 20 years later and try to deport them or something they did 15, 20 years ago. That's your 1996 Act. This is where we work. We're working. I wrote a critique about it, and I'll give you a copy of it if you want to before. A critique of the law. I call it the Mexican Exclusionary Act of 1996. And I think it's aimed at Mexico and Mexicans. I think it's aimed at, because if it isn't aimed deliberately, it's certainly 90% of them are Mexicans who are involved in it. And it has, for instance, it said, how is it that they're going to prevent, instead of like the Chinese Exclusionary Act, is it Chinese are not eligible for a visa. They can't do that today because of the international situation. They called it, of course, they used that bombing of the courthouse, and they called it the Anti-Terrorist Act. And it's the Immigration Act. It's the Anti-Terrorist Act. And they put it was very, very heavy on crime. For almost every crime is an aggravated felony and causes deportation. Then they took away 212C, which was, when I was a judge, I had the power to forgive a father and keep him here, and they took away the power of the immigration judge to forgive. 212C was erased, and was then it was reset in another statute, but it ruled that aggravated felons were not eligible for relief under this act. So,
Armendariz, let me ask you a couple of questions. Your son is Albert Jr.?
Albert Jr.
And he's your law partner?
He's my law partner, and we work together on immigration. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the other thing is, you wanted, I just need to make sure that I understand this. You wanted to get this man to bond out through his mother? Or through his wife? No,
the citizenship is through his mother.
Okay, she was a U.S.
He is being held on a deportation charge.
Oh, I see.
And the immigration law makes him ineligible for a visa. All people who are there for aggravated felonies are ineligible, generally speaking, ineligible. Some of them we get out with lesser crimes, but drugs, for instance, and DWI and things like that, they're ineligible for a visa.
But his mother was a U.S. citizen.
But his mother was a U.S. citizen, and he acquired U.S. citizenship through his mother. Mm-hmm. And we had to prove certain residence in the United States, and the issue was whether we had enough proof or not. I urged the judge that I did, and I appealed it, and I won the point, and I had enough.
Okay.
And he won't.
Okay, speaking of mothers, let's talk a little bit about growing up here in El Paso.
Yes.
What were your fathers doing, your parents?
My father was Juan N. Armendariz. He was very proud of the N because it's mostly San Juan Bautista, and he was San Juan Nepomuceno. The N was for a saint, Nepomuceno. And he was very proud of Juan N. Armendariz. He worked for the Mexican government, a federal employee, and he ran away. He and Mom ran from Villa because Villa was out to kill all federal employees. And so he and his brothers-in-law, my mother's brothers, who were also telegrafistas, telegraph, all came to the United States. My mother's brothers returned to Mexico, and I have several cousins who were born here. In fact, I was baptized together with a lady, my uncle's daughter, and we were baptized together. We were born almost together. And when my father and my mother had come from Mexico.
From what part of Mexico?
They came from Chihuahua. They lived in Chihuahua. My father was from Rio Florido, Chihuahua, and my mother was from Camargo, a little closer to Chihuahua than Camargo itself. But she was there.
So what did they do when they got here to El Paso?
What?
What did they do?
My father worked for Victor Records down here on South El Paso, a man by the Calderon, until they were able to go back to Mexico and then he worked in Juarez for years, and that's when my mother died. See, my mother died I was 9 on the 11th of August, and on the 17th of August she died, and he was left with 7 children and no mother. And my sister Emily became our mother. She was 12, and my sister Alice, who was 16, she would work to help support the family. And then all of us grew up together right in the Depression. And my father told me one time, when I was crying because I needed something I didn't have at school, he said, "Son, I spend a lot of money in rent because I want you to go to a mixed school. I want you to be here north of the tracks. And in order to do that, I spend money because I want you to learn English well. I want you people, I want my children to be good American citizens." And I follow that up because this was a father who gave us a grave idea of responsibility. And that's, I think, where all of us learn responsibility. Because when World War II came, he called there was 5 of us brothers, all brothers, and he called us for a conference. What he wanted to tell us was that he and Cuca, my mother, had chosen this country as the better of the two to raise us in, and that we owed allegiance to this country, and it was our country, and he wanted us to recognize it right now, because your country is at war, and they may call you, and you are not Mexican, you're not Mexican citizens, you don't owe allegiance to Mexico, you owe it to the United States, and I would expect you to answer the call. If you die from it, I want no cowards in my family, and you're going to obey, and you're going to do this. And none of us had any quarrel with that, because we knew that's the way he felt. He didn't even have to tell us. And actually, there's 2 of us that went, and the other 3 went to work at the shipyards to build ships during the war in San Francisco. They moved to join the war effort because they couldn't join because of their health or something. But they went to work, and all 5 of us then made. But then this to follow through, this was my really opening, awakening into my future, because I had dropped out of school at high school level and gotten married and had Albert and everything else. And here I was, I had been in the Army for 4 years, I've discharged, and I have 40 months of GI Bill. GI Bill means I had 40 months of school. So Mary Lou and I talked it over. I wanted to be a lawyer when I was 8 years old with Pablo Ayub, MD, who is my friend and compadre. We sold newspapers at the corner of the Cortez, right downtown El Paso. We didn't have a pair of shoes. We didn't have anything. And he would say, "When I grow up, I'm going to be a doctor." And I would say, "When I grow up, I'm going to be a lawyer." Both of us made it. Both of us made it because we had the opportunities and we seized them, and we had the desire. And this is what I urge my young children, Hispanics. You can do anything. You can reach any place if you just have the inspiration and the guts to follow it through. But Mom and I talked about 40 months, and she said, "God will provide. Let's go as far as we can go." First thing that happened, I was at UTEP pre-law. I had to enter pre-law. I was at UTEP, and they announced that the accredited law schools, including the ones I was going to go to, had given us 2 years of credit, not towards a degree, but towards law school. So we had to take 60 hours of 3rd and 4th grade level work. I'd been out of school for 10 and a half years. You had to make a 3.1 or 3.0 better, so 3.1. and the accredited law schools would admit you to law school. So I went to UTEP, and in 17 months of day and night studying, I got my 60 units with a B+ average. I was admitted at the University of Southern California. I had 23 months left for a 3-year course. I went summer and winter, and I gave the government back one month and 7 days of change from the 40 months, and I received my degree at USC in 1950, in January of 1950. I had caught asthma, which I have now, and I just caught it again for some reason. And the doctor had suggested we come home because it was going to hurt me, and we came to El Paso. Came back to El Paso. My father loaned me $50 to open up an office downtown after I passed the bar in Texas. I passed the bar in Texas. And I started at the Banner Building dealing with poor people. I had people waiting for me when I opened the doors. The Lord has been with me all through this. I have taken care of poor people. I haven't become I have no substance, financial substance, in the sense that others have acquired. I could have if I had done it differently, but if I had to do over, I think I'd do it again. And that is, I spent maybe, I would say, 6 hours out of every 10 hours, because I haven't worked 8 hours, 10 hours a week, in dedicating myself to the betterment of the Hispanic, and I'm talking about better acceptance in the society, the American society, getting them prepared to be Americans and to follow and to honor this country and to demand to know how to do their duties, like the LULAC say, learn how to do your duty before you exert your rights. And I tried to get that over to them, that we have to all learn how to do our duty, because then we can exert our rights. And that's what I have dedicated my life to, and every minute that I have. Marilyn was wonderful. She was sort of a widow, because I would take off, especially when I was national president of the LULACs. Mm-hmm. I would take off on trips and be gone. And later, I developed a plan, because my kids were growing up and I was missing them too much, that I would give them a turn. We call it los turneábamos. Mm-hmm. And I would take one to every trip. And I got beautiful, beautiful man-to-man or man-to-woman time with my children on trips that I would take. Some of them were awfully interesting, and I have some interesting stories about that. I'll tell, for instance, I tell a story in my daughter Letty, who when she was 15 was just a beautiful blonde, taken after my mother's grandparents and all that, who were blue-eyed and blonde, and very, very beautiful little girl. And we were registering. I was in San Antonio, Texas. The fact is, it was for a MALDEF conference, and we were in San Antonio, Texas, and we were registering. And this couple behind me say, in Spanish, they say, "Oh, that dirty old man! Look at him." The wife was telling, "She can't be over 15 years old. Look at him, and he's going into the hotel with her." And we were listening in Spanish, of course, and Letty didn't say a word. And then the man was telling us, quiet, shut up. But she would go on and on. She went on and on. When I got through registering, I turned around and told him in Spanish, I said, "You may register, sir." And his mouth opened and wide. And then I turned around to her, I said, "She's my daughter, ma'am. You don't have to worry." And he then started, he started hollering her, "Medici!" I mean, he just swept the floor, and Letty and I just passed by. That's and I always remember that as one of the beautiful things. But with all my children, we all took them.
Let me back up a little bit here. What did they call that when the law schools would give you credit, would give you the 60 hours? How was that when they did that?
What it is a waiver it was a waiver of the requirement of a undergraduate degree in order to get. They waived the undergraduate degree under the conditions that you do 60 hours of third and fourth grade level work with a B+ average or better. They gave us 2 years. They told us that they were giving us 2 years consideration for our knowledge and learning in the Army while we were in the Army.
Okay, now let's back up and let's go to when here you are in El Paso and you're a kid. Would you like a drink of water, Judge Armendariz?
No, that's fine. I'm all
Sure?
right.
Okay.
Well, I'll get it with Coke in later.
Okay. You're here in El Paso and you're going to school. And your father is working. What's he doing?
He's doing telegraph work. He makes Mexican money every time he crosses the border.
He goes back and forth every day.
Right. Every time he changes his money, it dilutes because it's always been cheaper than the peso's always been cheaper than the dollar. Huh?
So he was coming over and you were going to school where in El Paso?
I went to Old Bailey School. And Bailey School, for those here in El Paso, is the YMCA is now there on Montana Street. It was north of the tracks, I told you. And it was the oldest grammar school in El Paso. And I graduated from it in I don't forget what year, but the next year they closed it up and sold the property to YMCA.
So it was a mixed school.
It was a mixed school. And when I went into kindergarten, I knew not one word of English. But I have been, all my life, I have been against, I won't say against it, that's not a good word, but I have been wary of this dual teaching, in other words, bilingual education, because the LULACs at that time, and when I was, and because of this, I learned English immediately because I was mixed up with Anglo children. I had to learn it or we couldn't get along. And I learned English and all my brothers and sisters learned English and we learned it immediately. None of us knew it when we went to school. When we went into school and we learned it immediately. And we were able to master the English language and get good grades in English, good grades in literature, good grades in things like that, and be able to do what we are, because we were mixed classes. And I always looked and I fought for integration of the schools. I did a lot of fight for the integration of the schools until the LULACs during the Tijerina administration, not the same Tijerina, Felix Tijerina, put up, and they were the ones that started a little school of the 400. Now, this is very beautiful history of LULAC, and I'm going to tell you about it because I haven't told it to anybody else. But the conflict within the LULAC organization, the leadership, when the little school of the 400 was proposed by Tijerina, was discussed openly in a debate at a National Assembly in Arizona. And we were all there, and on one side was John J. Herrera of Houston, and God rest his soul, and on the other side was Felix Salazar, and they were the forces of the little school of the 400, which was Tijerina. And we fought the theory, and we told them that we had fought segregation for life. That had been LULAC position, that we will be giving them a reason now, a valid reason to separate our children based on, we always insisted we didn't need any help. All we needed was integration. We'll learn the English language if you integrate us. So this was a basic difference between the two. And the Tijerina forces won. And they won, and LULAC changed their attitude from fighting integration into trying to getting the kids educated to a little school of the 400 and bilingual education, what came afterwards, and all of the failures of bilingual education that we hear about today are related back to the fact that the LULAC organization was the only organization that protested this, had stopped the protest and had changed their mind to let's educate our children the way we can. Now, I can't say that he was wrong. I just can't, because there's a lot of good in a lot of the programs that I see. But I think there has been, most of it has been mismanagement, not enough money, and a lot of people who have used it to segregate rather than to teach. Mm-hmm. And that those are the evils that we have to bring out of the system. California finished it, and we hope that California finished it in order to integrate their schools. If they do that, I have no quarrel with that. But it's a very, very deep subject in the Hispanic culture and in Hispanic leadership, and it divided us for years. It divided the leadership into two camps, and that's where.
So when you were growing up, did you speak Spanish at home?
When we were growing up, we spoke Spanish, but we had Anglo friends, and we lived right there here at St. Clemens, which is 2 blocks from here, 2 blocks from my office, and we used to skate on the sidewalk, and there were mixture. We were just as many Anglo kids as we were, and if we had, it was during the Depression. If somebody brought a couple of cookies, those cookies would be divided amongst the whole bunch, and everybody got a little piece of cookie, because that's the kind of love and affection that we had for each other. Not one of us ended in jail or disgraced. Not one of that group, not one of that group that I know of ever ended but successful, because we were integrated, we loved each other, and we never talked race or to each other. We just try to get along with each other.
Now, were there other schools in El Paso that were segregated, where they just had?
Yeah. Well, let me tell you what it was. We used to sing a song when we were at Bailey School. Someday I'm going to be a tiger, panther, or a bear. We had 3 high schools here. The Tiger, where was El Paso High, was a mixed school. It was the only mixed school. It was the only 2 of the mixed. Bowie was completely 100% Mexican and still is. Okay? And still are. And Austin was the Anglo school, but now they have moved out, and now Austin is another Mexican school. And so we have a lot of high schools now. Some of them are integrated, and some of them are still not integrated. Some of them are still like Austin. Jefferson is Bowie, Jefferson, and Austin that have a very, very large percentage of Hispanic segregated schools. Now, we did fight the Alvarado case, MALDEF. After we'll talk about MALDEF later, but MALDEF through me bought the Alvarado versus El Paso Independent School District case. Alvarado versus El Paso Independent School District, and this was the first time that a school district was found to have had deliberate discrimination in some of the areas that we alleged. Deliberate discrimination against the Hispanic. Some of the stories that we got there were, let me tell you about them. We were able, we had a judge here who surprised us because he dismissed our case. So MALDEF had to pay to appeal the case before we got a right to go to court. It cost $30,000 to appeal the whole thing. And the Fifth Circuit ruled that the Judge Wynn was wrong, and that we should have our hearing, and ordered complete and absolute discovery for us. And when we got this discovery, we got minutes of the board of the El Paso Independent School District Board that would talk about schools in the South Side. Where are we going to get money to feed these Mexicans in those terms? And it was in the books. In the books, obviously and we won that case, and we stopped busing. They were busing from kids from Smelter, which is in the West End, right by one of the schools that was Anglo, into El Paso High and filling it up with Hispanics, and that was one of the main thrusts. But we won a lot of points on that, and what we did win, I think much more important than a lawsuit, was that there was a change in the attitude of the El Paso Independent School District Board, and that led to many, many improvements in the development of the Hispanic student and the teaching of it. And we're rather proud of it. Although I've got to tell you this. I'm sorry. I've got to tell you this, that my son and I just gave 86 high school graduates a test because we needed 2 employees. And that we chose 2 of the best, or the 2 best. And that it has taken us months to train them because they have no basic knowledge of grammar. They're completely, and these are high school graduates from El Paso high schools. And it's very, very disappointing to see that the product is just not right, not coming out right. Tell me
if you've ever changed. Let's go back to your childhood again, because you said that your oldest sister, who was 14 at the time, was working after your mom
16,
died. 16 at the time. What is her name?
What
is her name?
Alicia.
Alicia.
Alicia died about a month ago.
Oh,
without rest her soul. Huh? But
what kind of work was she doing?
She worked for in the basement of one of the stores downtown. What was it? Not J.C. Penney, but one of the others. You know, she worked at one of the.
What did she do?
Woolworth.
What did she do?
Woolworth. She was a clerk. And we used to go to her. For instance, we wanted to go to the show or something. Well, at that time, it cost a nickel. And we would go to her. We were going to go to the show. She was the only one who would give it to us. So we would go to her. So she worked all her life. And every penny she got, she would get her check. It wasn't a check. It was an envelope. I remember, because she would bring the envelope sealed to my father and give it to him. She would give that for, and then Emily, of course, was the one that cooked for us. She was 12, and so their father would put maids in her, but God, they were horrible. It was horrible to live with maids. So there. That's
so. What kind of did your sister Emily? Did she know how to cook before your mom died?
My sister Emily was not. Of course, she never learned to cook, but she would make basic things. She could cook beans, you know, and she could cook sopa de arroz, which is your main thing. And now and then she would come up with something that she read about or something. But she would feed us.
That must have been incredibly stressful and very difficult for the family after your mom died.
Oh, it was. It was terrible. And then there was one thing that really threw me. My mother was laid up in the front room during a wake. Uh-huh. Her body was there. Mm-hmm. And I remember sitting in a corner and watching everybody get drunk and all the talk and then laughing and I maintain a very bitter memory of my mother's wake, and I would love to have missed it, because my mother was a concert pianist and who married and couldn't finish. I mean, she couldn't practice it, but she was a music teacher. And I would sit for hours because I've always been a lover of music. She told me once, you know, son, music, to be good for the world, be good to people, music has 2 kinds of people: those that make it and those that enjoy it and listen to it. He said, and I'm glad that you are one of us, because you enjoy music so much. But she would have these groups that would come in with beards and things and instruments. And I imagine now, because now I know what it is, it was quartets and quintets with a piano and that's what I was hearing. But I remember that. But my mother was a beautiful lady, but she was very young when she died. See, she was only 38, I think. But she had 6 children, so we lost her mother.
7 children.
Yeah, 7 children. 7 children. So one died. We say 6 because only 6 of us. One died. He was given to my uncle, and his children caught whooping cough, and our brother died when he was born. My mother was in sick bed for 9 months before she died. Couldn't get up.
What is wrong with her?
Had a baby.
What is wrong with her?
They said gastroenteritis, but I'm sure it was some kind of cancer. All of us are sure it was cancer. Mm-hmm. Then my wife, of course, was 8 months in the hospital. So I resuffered my mother's with my wife. Mm-hmm. So I had two of my loved ones die in very, very, very bad conditions. And of course, I'm a believer that I always tell anybody that, oh, he popped off and he's dead. My brother Cesar like that, he just had a heart attack and was dead. Said, you don't know how lucky you are. The Lord took him and was very grateful to him, because it's bad when they're very sick and die. Very bad.
Let me ask you this: when your mom would have people over, these quintets over, was that the whole neighborhood invited, or how would she meet these people?
Well, there was there were people there that would listen to their music, yes. And they would come in, especially on a Sunday afternoon. She would have people there listening. And I was always on the corner in the chair that I had and listening to him, because I used to listen to him all the time. She had...
This was classical music.
It was classical music.
So where did she learn classical music? Where did she learn classical music?
At the University of Chihuahua. University of Chihuahua. No. She took piano. She had a degree in piano, in concert piano. And she played, I remember she played beautifully. I remember my mother. Now, I remember my mother today only when she's sitting at the piano. I don't remember anything else about her. See, I was only 9. And I remember my mama at the piano. I have my brother Cecil, who died young, has a daughter, Becky. She plays the cello. They're the ones that got the musical talent. And we were at a concert. There was all the brothers were there. And when we quit, at the same time, she looks just like Mother. It was the most amazing thing, and she looks just like my mother does. Our memory of it. You know?
Okay, so then you went to high school. Let's move up. You were in high school.
Yeah.
At what high school?
At El Paso High. Now, I want to tell you about that, because in El Paso High, we had a teacher by the name of Abby Marguerite Durkee, and she taught a music appreciation diploma. And that's when I learned what my mama was talking about. That's when I learned about symphonies, and and she was beautiful, and just really, really a beautiful teacher, and taught us to appreciate music. She was the one who introduced me, for instance, the first symphony I heard was Schubert's Unfinished, and she explained it to us and everything. The next one was the Sixth Symphony of Beethoven, the Pastoral. And that's a beautiful symphony. And she explained the birds and everything, and we could hear them. She played them for us. So I learned I really got an intense love of music at that time. And it has been very comfortable for me. I love music.
So this is when you also met your wife in high school?
Oh, my wife loved it. We used to go to every concert we go.
But you met her in high school?
I met her in high school, yes. But she went to El Paso Technical, which was she was learning to be a stenographer. And I would, of course, every time I got a chance, I would go over there and we would go out.
So how did you meet her? How did you meet your wife?
I met her at a dance. I met her. My brother Manny took her to a dance, and then he went off with a girl.
He was older.
Yeah, and he went off with a girl he liked, and then I sort of took over, and then that's when Mary Lou and I started. But that's where I met her. My brother Manny took her to a dance, and that's where I met her. And we were very happy. It was a 53-year marriage, and she got sick about 1969. That's when she had what they diagnosed it as heart, and they were wrong. It's a wrong diagnosis. It was obviously what I know now, because it happens to me now. You have your sugar goes low, and you have a coma because of a diabetic coma. I think that's what it was. It was either too high or too low. And she propped her in the front of the house. Marlon took her, and she was very sick. They put a heart pacer in her, but she was sick the rest of her life until she died. And the doctor, when she was going to die, asked me to let him cut off the heart pacer because it was impeding the heart rather than helping it. And he's the one that told me she never needed it. They should never have put it in her.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so those are the things that happened.
So you were in high school, and then y'all got married when you were in high school?
No. I graduated, and about 3 months later, let me tell you something about our marriage. It was a beautiful wedding. We were very poor, but I was making $12.50 at AB Poe greasing cars, AB Poe Motor, and we got married. But we had been saving a little bit, and we got a lady to make her dress and everything else. And A.B. Poe Jr., Upton Poe, loaned us a black 1949 Chrysler. No, 41 Chrysler. 1941 Chrysler. It was 41. 1941 Chrysler in 6 41 Plymouths with the color of the maid's dress. And for the wedding, and he gave us chauffeurs. I never will forget Alton Poe, and never will stop thanking him, because it was such a beautiful wedding.
What color were the cars?
The color one of them was bluish, the other was greenish. It was beautiful, and the girls were dressed beautifully and everything. It was a beautiful wedding, and we were married for 53 years until the Lord took her.
You. I know that at some point, let's see, you graduated from high school, you went to work at A.B. Poe.
Right.
Greasing cars?
Greasing cars. Then
what?
Then I worked, when I graduated, we were working at selling shoes at Lion's Shoe Store. From there, I went to A.B. Poe. And at Lion's Shoe Store, there was a man by the name of Philip Horwitz. And Philip Horwitz Abe Horwitz was the owner of the shoe store. And he used to talk to me and tell me, Albert, you're too smart, you're too intelligent to be screwing around with shoes in the back. He says, you go to school. And so he kept me with it, and I went to A.B. Poe, and I had a fellow by the name of Medlock who was one of the service center people, and he kept telling me the same thing. So when I came out of the Army, I went from A.B. Poe to the Army, I had the idea that I wanted to go to school. And let me tell you what happened. By that time, I had gotten a job at Fort Bliss, at Ordnance. And I was very good over there, a good job and everything. So when
what were you doing there?
I was in the parts room, handling parts. Very good at it because I knew how to match parts for different trucks and things like that. Anyway, I went back to Fort Bliss after I got out of the Army to look for my job. And this is what happened. And I have no doubt there was discrimination because there was two of us. And I was better qualified, but the other young man was Anglo. And they told me that they were going to give him the job because he had a year's college and I didn't. Even though the description of the job did not require college. And I explained that to him. I know that it doesn't require college and that my credentials are better. Well, we think that this is going to do better, and that's it. You know what I mean? So I started to walk out. I said, come here, we got other jobs. Where are you going? I said, I'm going down to get that 1 year college. They did me the biggest favor in the world because I would never have accomplished what I have. I would never be here today if they had given me that job. And they denied it to me, and that's what did it. That was no doubt. Because from then on, I was going to go to school.
Now, what was the motivation here? Was it because you said, I'm going to show them? Or was it because if 1 year of college is really that important, I'm going to get me that 1 year? I mean, it sounds like you don't really believe...
I didn't have the keenness that I have today, or the awareness of how vicious discrimination is, how subtle and how mean it is. And I can tell you now stories that will, on which I base my words. At that time, I was naive, and I really came out of there saying, "Well, heck, I've got. Let me look at this. I've got years of college. I may as well do it. That's what I want, and this is my opportunity." I went back and talked to Mary Lou. She said, "Let's go," and she was a medical stenographer by that time and helped me. And if it hadn't been for Mary Lou, I wouldn't be what I am here today. Now, let me tell you about Mary Lou, because USC came next. At USC, I was a token Mexican, 1 out of 386. And they treated me as such. treated me very, very. They wouldn't study with me. They wouldn't let me. They wouldn't let me eat with them. They wouldn't, you know.
What would they do? How would they not let you eat with them?
Well, I mean, they wouldn't invite me to eat lunch with them or study groups or anything else. And I went into my friends then became Jewish people that I had never known in my life. Jewish people. Leonard Balaban, a fellow by the name of Selwyn, the best friends that a man could ever have. Because they taught me, they helped me, they were smart and they helped me to learn the concepts. And I would come home and tell Mom, Mama, pack up, let's go home. I'm gonna go home. Let's shop. What happened? Well, they called me a spade, or they did this or did that. He said, Albert, you didn't come here to make friends. You came here to get an education, and that's what they don't want you to get. You get back there and stop bitching. And by golly, she'd send me back to school. And she was great. I mean, gee, I don't know what I would have done without her. I miss her so much. But anyway, she really made me, and I got through all right. Now something happened at the 50th, and I want to tell you about this because it's right in line with this. At our 50th reunion, I went. Marty, my new wife, and I went to the 50th reunion at USC. That was last year. 50 years since I. And a gentleman was meeting me at the front. He was waiting for me and asked me if I was Judge Armendariz. And I said, yes, I am. And he says, well, I'm Judge so-and-so. He says, and I wanted you to know, before you get too busy in here, I wanted you to hear me. I wanted to tell you something. I said, yeah, what is it? And, you know, he surprised me. He says, I want you to know how sorry I am that I did not make your acquaintance and your friendship when we were at USC Law School. And I recognized that he was one of the biggest purveyors of that discrimination that I had talked about. Which goes to show you that you can overcome this. It all depends on how you act. Where we lose a lot in our society, in our Hispanic society, is that we don't teach our children to do their duty, to be Americans, so that we can all be proud of them. And the Anglo society will realize that we're just as good as they are, and that they'll accept us, that we're all equal, that we're all Americans, and that the United States of America, if it's going to fail, not going to fail from without. Nobody will ever defeat this country from without, but we might defeat ourselves from within if we don't learn how to live with each other. I'm 81 years old, and I'm very worried about it. We haven't stopped it. We've made a lot of strides, but it's there, and I want it heard. I want it in my memories. I want everybody to know that at 81, I still worry an awful lot of what will happen to this country if we don't recognize how to get along with each other. I don't care what we are. You read that Chinese Exclusionary Act, you read what they did to the Italians, you read what they did to the Irish, you read the history of all of this discrimination that we've had, and everybody that comes in here and gets treated badly, as the Koreans are and others are today, the Vietnamese, everybody. And it's just not right. There's no reason why we should be like this. We have to be together. And if I accomplish anything in my late life, is that I want to leave a heritage of telling people of all races and creeds in the United States that we have to learn how to live with each other. We had a riot at one of the high schools the other day. It's got to stop. You can't solve this problem by fighting each other. You can only solve it by working together for the good of everybody. You have to learn how to work together, work these problems out. And I thank you for allowing me to say that. All right?
Let me ask you this, Judge Armendariz. Why do you think that the Jewish students would have, it sounds like, did they make overtures to you to try to include you? The Jewish students at USC?
Now, I never considered whether it was me who sought them out or they who sought me out. I sort of think it was sort of a natural thing I went towards because I needed somebody to study with. You just can't learn this stuff without discussing it. When you go to law school, you have to discuss the concept with somebody. And so I sort of flirted into them. And then there was another thing. Mama had her mama with us. We called her Ita. And Lita was a wonderful cook. And these guys loved Mexican food, so we would meet at my house, and she would make them tacos, enchiladas, or they would come over, and we would have beautiful sessions. And by the way, we had a black person too, Ted Schaefer, and he died right after he graduated. He died. I'm sorry. He was a very good student, and very, very, very good in discussions and things. But he died very young. So, but Leonard Balaban is still there, and Selwyn, and Gottlieb. There was a Gottlieb that I just got his death notice the other day. He died, and he was a proponent of opponent of the death penalty. Very, very, very active against it. But I enjoyed them. I really, really. Fact is, Balaban saved me from quitting. The GI Bill would stop, and Mama had gotten pregnant with Edward. We couldn't pay our rent, and I was going to have to go to work. I was going to have to quit school. And I discussed it with Leonard, and he says, "Oh no," he says, "how much do you need?" I said, "Well, no, I don't want to. I don't know when to pay you." So he loaned me. He pushed $400 on me, which I was able to pay the rent and stay in law school. And luckily, my checks came back, and I was able to pay him back in a hurry. But it was that close. I got very close to the Jewish community there at USC, and I'm going to talk to them about it because I'm going to be able to talk to them and tell them what happened to me, so they'll know and realize it. So.
Let me just a little housekeeping thing. How long did you work for that shoe company?
Oh, the day I graduated, the next day after I graduated from El Paso High, I was there for a year.
Uh-huh. And
for a year and maybe 2 months or something like that.
And the name of it was?
By the way, my wife, Mary Lou, who I already met, worked on the corner shoe store. And of course, that's when we really developed our friendship, because I had met her through that party, as I say, but she worked at the shoe store too. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So what is the name of the shoe store? What is the name of the shoe store?
Lion Shoe Store. It was two of them.
L-I-O-N?
L-I-O-N. And they had a great big lion in front there on
L-I-O-N.
L-I-O-N.
Okay.
L-I-O-N.
And what is the name of the owner?
The owner was Horwitz, Horwitz, Abe.
Okay.
And Philip Horwitz was my mentor.
Okay. Didn't you at one point tell me, Judge Armendariz, that you thought that you'd never be able to be the manager of a shoe store? That you could be a clerk, but you would never be able to be a manager?
Oh, yes.
Why is that?
Well, he told me. He told me this. And by the way, I tested this. Let me. He would tell me this. He says, "My brother," he says, "he'll never look at Felipe." He said, "He's got me here because I'm his brother." He says, "But he would never make Felipe. If I got sick or something, Felipe, he would bring one of his Jewish friends and make him the boss." Felipe had worked for him for years, and he was the one that ran the shoe store, really. And he was named Felipe de la Rosa, who became a very good friend of mine too, would help me. And so he was the one that told me that I would never rise. Don't ever believe that you are going to rise in this business to be management or to go anywhere. You're going to sell shoes the rest of your life, like Felipe.
And was this because you were Mexican?
Yeah, absolutely. And Philip Horwitz was telling me this.
And at the time, was that kind of the thinking here in El Paso? Because people think, well, El Paso, having such a large Latino population, that there would be a lot more opportunities and upward mobility.
I told you I tested it. Later, Mary Lou and I bought a home on Stanton Street, right across the street from a new Jewish temple. And the rabbi there and I became great friends. We would talk and we would philosophize on the street there. And I was telling him how it was, how his people were very discriminatory towards our people. And he invited me to talk to his congregation about it. I did. And then I told him about, for instance, the one of the furniture stores here, and how this guy by the name of Olivas had worked all his life, and how they had brought in a man from New York to take over the department that Olivas ran, and wouldn't give Olivas a job. And the man at that meeting got up and admitted it, and said he never realized that it was wrong, that he was so sad that, by golly, they never thought in terms of that we had the ability or capacity to do that. And so I have never shut up about this thing, and that's my problem. I mean...
So Judge Armendariz, when you decided that you wanted to go to law school...
Yeah.
Was that something that it seemed like that was hard for a Mexican-American to attain?
Oh, it was an impossibility. First place, they wouldn't let us in. Law schools were very, very tight on us. Secondly, we didn't have the money. You see, one of the problems with our families was my own father, for instance. When Mary Lou and I went to tell my father that I was going to law school, I went to tell him, son, hijo, tú tienes responsabilidades, you have responsibilities. You're married and you have a child. It's too late for you to go to school. That was his attitude, complete. And I won't give you my blessing because I'm not going to allow you to do this because you are failing in your responsibility to your family. You got to go find a job, get to work. It was my wife, Mary Lou, who loved very much, who went to talk to him and said, Lito, Albert and I discussed this, and I'm going to help him. I'm the stenographer. I'm going to help him because I want a lot of children. And he can't afford them on $12.50 a week. He can't afford the children, and I want him, and I want a lot of children. Well, we ended up with 6. She wanted a lot of children, and she got them. But by golly, she worked for them. She worked for them because she made me what I was, so I could afford the 6 children. And that's what she wanted. That's what she got. And she worked hard for it. And I thank the Lord that she was with me, because I would never have been what I am if she had not given me her. And she convinced my dad, because bueno, it's a mutual thing. Then I'm going to have to give my consent, because Mary Lou knew that I wouldn't go without my father's blessings. I wouldn't do anything without my father. None of us did. We were so close to him, and he was such an important character in our lives. But his attitude was no, and that was generally speaking, all Mexican parents would say, ya va a trabajar, ya no da ayuda. He's going to work, he's going to help us. And that's maybe a sign of poverty, of necessity, of survival. But I was so happy when they told me that I'm going to be able to speak to 125 Hispanics at USC Law. 120, I mean, I'm going to tell them, it's, boy, you just don't know what a blessing it is to me to see 125 law students here. Because now we're going to have all the help. The Hispanic population is not going to lack fighters.
Let me ask you this, Judge Armendariz, because your wife was working as a stenographer. Was it not unusual for a woman to be working outside of the home?
Oh, yeah.
A Latina woman to work as a stenographer, that must not have been a very common.
At that time, it was very, very. It was a no-no for a woman to work, and I had the same idea. I didn't want her to work, and as long as after we came out of law school, my wife never worked a day again, because I wouldn't let her. I wouldn't. I mean, no, But and I'm the same way. I didn't think that she should have to work. But I do believe that women should work, and that they have their own right to live. But when they're with a man and they have a family, that work should be limited to a definite goal to where then she can take care of the children, because the children, and I just had an example in my own daughter, Mary Lou, who has two children who are now the age that is so difficult. And she had to quit a very, very good job at one of the hospitals, not only for that, but for other reasons, but because she wanted to be home with her children, because they just weren't getting the right to, So it's a difficult situation, and I recognize that a woman has a heck of a lot harder situation than a man does, because she's the one that has to think of the children and take care of them, and it's very unfair, I think, but that's the way the Lord made it, and that's the way it is.
Let me ask you this: why do you think you worked for a year at Lyon, and then you worked for how long at the other place?
And maybe before I worked about 2 years where the Army took me.
Okay, and so then when you were in the Army, where were you stationed?
But I went to Fort Bliss. Mm-hmm. They sent me to Fort Ord for overseas, and I failed the exam because of my eyesight. Mm-hmm. They sent me back to Fort Bliss to be discharged, and instead of discharging me, they put me in a limited service unit, and put me in ordnance, where I was working before, doing the same thing I was as a civilian. Oh. And I became the post motor pool sergeant there and ran the post motor pool during the war. And I had a lot of fun in the Army, really. To me, it was a lot of fun because
when you were doing that, you were in a supervisory position.
A supervisory position. But I only got as far as a sergeant, because they brought in the lieutenant, who was an Anglo, who was over me. He didn't do anything. The Captain Ogan, the captain, I used to have to sign his voucher because he didn't know how to fill in a voucher to get paid. And he was the captain. And that is the truth. I would have to fill out his voucher for his pay because he didn't have the ability to do it. And he was the captain over us. And he was Anglo.
Did that change your view about things? Having to fill out that voucher for the captain?
Well, it didn't disturb me because I was happy to do it for him. But it did make me think, why should this man be a captain and I be a sergeant? Where is the justice in this? Are they looking for people to stand up, or looking for people to do the work and to do what they have to do? And but this has happened. Some of the stories that I have on this point are very, very strong. Let me bring a point that I remember for this, because I want to tell it to you. Raymond Tellez was the first mayor of El Paso Hispanic. And he called me and named me on his civil service commission. And he told me that he was not going to be able to back me, that he wanted me to know this, because I have to assume the character of a mayor for everybody. But I'm putting you in there because I know there's a lot of problems with city employment. And I want you to see what you can do about them. But I want you to know is you're on your own.
What did he mean that he couldn't back you? He was going to name you to the
thing,
but he wasn't
going to. Well, he meant he wasn't going to go to the newspapers or things like that. You know what I mean? He wasn't going to actively back me. What he was trying to tell me is, I'm putting in you here because you have the ability to do it without my help. That's what he was telling me. Okay? So I accepted. Now we're here in the first night Civil Service Commission. And it so happens that the first item of business was the eligibility lists for police and fire. Eligibility list. Now, an eligibility list is a list that is created by a test that is given to applicants for police and fire. And they are graded. And those tests that are graded are added 5 points for veterans. And then they're put in a list with the highest grade and the lowest. And the theory of civil service is that if a department head asks for one officer, you give him the top 3 and he's to choose the one out of the top 3. And the ones that aren't chosen go back to the top of the line. And then so on and so forth. Now, it passed, it was a round table, passed every commissioner without comment, not one word.
How many commissioners were there?
Huh?
How many commissioners were there?
There was 7 of us. It passed 6 commissioners and came to me. And Mr. Adair, who's the 8th member, he was the chairman of the commission. And he's sitting next to me. They put me on his left. Okay? I looked at this list, and every Hispanic name on those lists was redlined, had a red line through it. And it says DEPT, period, REF, period. Every Hispanic, not one Hispanic was not redlined. I glanced at it and I said to Mr. Adair, "What is this, Mr. Adair? What do you mean, Mr. Adair? What are these red lines and what does DEPT, REF mean?" He says to me, and didn't answer my question, he says, "Well, we can't tell him who to hire." And I said, "Mr. Adair, you amaze me. What are we doing here? If we're the civil service, are these our lists or are they somebody else's lists?" "No, they're our lists. Are we going to approve them?" "Yes." So, well, why do you say that we can't tell them who? We're the ones that make these lists, don't we? "Are you alleging discrimination?" Jumped on it. And I said, "Well, thou hast said it. That's what it looks like to me." And they said, well, then he did something that I never expected, and I will always be grateful to him for. Because he said, "Mr. Armendariz, in view of these charges you made, I'm going to name you a committee of 1. I'm going to table this until the next meeting, which is a monthly meeting. And I'm going to ask you to report in writing to us the next."
You're telling me about the Civil Service Commission and what year was this, Judge Armendariz? What year was this Civil Service thing? Wait till you clear the...
1963.
Okay.
Not 1913 or 1943, 1963. Now, Mr. Adair did something that I really am proud of. He named me on that committee. I had just been given a card. I went into the archives because I'm a civil service commissioner, and I inspected every one of those. I spent almost 1 week in that office. I took out every folder that involved an Hispanic. And here are the conclusions that I reached. Number 1, from 1963 and before, I was only, 1953 to 1963 and before, because I only took 10 years. But this, I stated, this was prevailing before, way before. Every Hispanic that ever passed the exam had been redlined and was deleted from consideration as a policeman or a fireman in the city of El Paso. Number 2, there were Anglo names that were deleted, departmental refusal. By the way, departmental refusal means that the list had been given to the department head before they gave them to us to do this process of deleting them. Okay? So to facilitate the discrimination. Okay? Secondly, Anglo names were there. So I looked at their records. And they were either black, they were doing the same thing to the black. They were either black or the because it was all male, no female. Okay, that's another thing, no female. Every name on that list, Anglo, had a Mexican mother or a Mexican wife. Now they went that deeply into it. It was that deep rooted that they would look at the man's mother, who happened to be Cuarterón, had three half and half, and named Williams or something. Okay, he was black or he was that, and then I noticed that there was police officers who were Mexican. I mean, doggone it, how did they get through this? I mean, why? And I had to find out why. I had to answer that question for myself and for the committee or commission. So I went back into the archives and took Islas, Carrion. I remember their names because there were so few. I mean, every one of them had a written excuse by the chief why he had chosen a Mexican. Written excuse in the file. I need him for liaison with the Juarez Police Department or the Juarez Fire Department. I need him for downtown patrol. So I need a Spanish speaker for downtown patrol. They had to give a special reason why they hired a Mexican. Okay? When I reported this to the commission, I had the commission didn't use regulations. It used policy statements. And I had a proposed policy statement, and it said the following: from this date forward, no authority is given to the department head in that department to give any list of potential employees of the city of Albany to the department head for perusal before it is approved finally by the Civil Service Commission. Number 2, all rights to delete names that have been heretofore given to department heads are canceled and no longer exist. Number 3, if any department head has a reason why a name should be deleted after the commission has approved the list, they shall report to the commission in writing, and the commission shall call for a hearing, calling the interested party in due process, to give them due process, notice, and opportunity to be heard. The commission accepted those immediately. When I finished, no comment, moved to accept, and the issue was dead. And we opened the police department and the fire department to Hispanics. Now we have an Hispanic chief of police. Now, there was one thing that I wanted to tell right now. Because I sit in my chair, I say I'm 81 now, and I sit in my chair at home and Marty's working or something, and I'm sitting there studying or doing fun, whatever. And I worry a lot. Have I been instrumental in creating a monster Frankenstein for my people? And why do I say that? Because in the last 6 months, at least, in the last 90% of the claims of violation of civil rights and meanness of police officers, Border Patrol, because we did the same thing. We'll tell you about later about Border Patrol and everything else. 90% of them are perpetrated by the Hispanic officer. The ones that we fought so hard to put in there are the worst purveyors of civil rights violations. I have to worry about that. I have to worry about that. I have to say to me, I'm going to give me a lot of pluses for opening, and then I'm going to have to take off an awful lot of credit because I have created people that have no respect for their own people. And why is that? I don't know. I don't know. When I do in my memoirs, I end by saying to the future generation, the young, who are going to be interested in this subject, this is a matter that you are going to have to attend. I don't want you to go ahead like I did without realization that this is what you may be doing. You're going to have to discuss it. You'll have to find answers for it, because there has to be an answer why a police officer, right now, I'd go to immigration and I would rather get an Anglo to tend to my client than an Hispanic. And I put them in there. Because we did the same thing in Maldiv. When I was in Maldiv, I was the chairman of the board. We went to Washington, and I said to the board, create papers to present to each agency threatening a lawsuit if they don't open it up to Hispanics. And we did that, and we opened up the Border Patrol. We opened up everybody. All of this work I did, and now they are the worst purveyors of the human.
Let me ask you about this. I'd like to hear a little bit about your work with Maldiv,
right?
How that happened, how that came about.
All right. Let me tell you about Maldiv. When we had the Hernandez versus Texas case, and I talked about Hernandez versus Texas at that meeting in Austin a little bit, but let me refresh your memory on it. Hernandez versus Texas was a jury case that we fought, put Hispanics on juries in Texas. The lawyers, it was John J. Herrera and Gus Garcia, and this judge that I can't remember his name, and I will before I'm through. We met, Pete Tejeda and I met with them because they had to have $2,000 to buy the record to appeal to the Supreme Court. The case would be lost if they didn't come up with $2,000, and nobody had $2,000 to give them. I was the national president of the LULACs in 1953-54. And Pete was the president of Council Number 1 in San Antonio, Texas. Pete had funds, only funds available, were in a scholarship fund. The previous administration had given me $3,000. That's all they gave me when I took over the national presidency. And they had bound it by a resolution that would be for scholarships, not to be used for anything else.
This is why you give it to Maldiv or LULAC?
No, I'm talking about LULAC.
Okay.
When I took over the national presidency, the John J. Herrera administration gave me $3,000 tied up into a scholarship fund. That's all I got. Pete and I talked together, and we decided that this Hernandez case involved the whole issue of our right to sue under the 14th Amendment, which was for the black, not for the Hispanics. And they had created the theory of separate of a class within a class. It was a beautiful, beautiful legal argument. A class within that we were a class of people within the white class that needed protection under the 14th Amendment. That was the issue. Important as heck. I mean, there's no issue, no federal issue has ever been so important as this one. $2,000 worth of it. I took $1,000 out of my account. Pete took $1,000 out of his account. We gave it to them, and Hernandez versus Texas went to the Supreme Court, and we won it. Both of us faced impeachment by our LULAC members. Both of us were maligned by the LULACs for having taken them funds to do it because they didn't understand that there are things more important than scholarships. Okay? So, when Pete and I won this case, we then had some discussions afterwards. And we decided that we had to find a way to get a legal arm of the Hispanic movement that was funded somewhere. And it was Pete and Idar and others who then went after we created the idea. And I don't claim credit because they did this from San Antonio. It was the San Antonio group. And they went to the Ford Foundation and got the money. And then Pete called me and said, we've got the money. And then we went. Maldives was formulated at the UCLA summer camp at Lake Tahoe, Nevada. That's where we met. We met in the middle of winter. I took my daughter Letty, it was her turn, the same girl, and she was hired as a maid. She was already 16. She was hired as a maid because they didn't have any maid service, and there was a lot of people who had to eat, who had to bring drinks and all that. And she made a little money. She was happy as heck because she made money. But it was a beautiful snow. We had to dig out the place to go to the meeting, and that's where Maldiv was born. And there was a whole group of us, and we were the guests of the black group, the
NAACP,
the Legal Defense Fund, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and they were our mentors. They were the ones that helped us set it up. And I will be forever grateful to the black community for doing that for us, because if they had not cooperated, they had not invited us, Maldiv would never have been born. And that was they deserve a lot of credit. But Pete Herina was a head man, and I call Pete Herina, and they don't give him the credit, but I do. He is a father of Maldiv. Pete Herina is a father of Maldiv. The rest of us were in with him, and he and I were in at the beginning. But what we did was we created this, and this judge was named judge right then and there. And in the first meeting, they had to elect the president of the board, and I was elected. I was the first elected president of the board. That's when I did what I say about the meetings then we had a meeting in Mexico City with the president. We went to the where Bush was the other day at the home there. Beautiful guy.
Los Pinos.
Mm-hmm.
Why was it important for you all to go to Mexico and have a meeting in Mexico?
Well, we had the same idea that's just going on today. That we needed the Mexican government, and we needed the Mexican to help us with some of the problems that we had over here, in some way or another. That's what we went to talk to. The main thing that we got out of President Echeverria was that he gave us immediately, in 2 days after the meeting, he had dictated a presidential decree that has the force of law in Mexico, giving Mexican Americans the right to own land in Mexico. Right to own land in Mexico. And it's still the law because it had never been taken away. And you and I have been going by a piece of property in Juarez right now where Anglos can't or Americans can't, but we can. But we talked a lot of cooperation by Mexico on some of the fights for equality that we had here, and he was very, very charming, very beautiful greetings, and that was. And we had some very good meetings. We had another one in Washington when I was the president. And as I say, we presented a paper. I presented it to Immigration Naturalization Service myself. And we opened up that place for Hispanics. So we've done a lot of work on this thing, and we've had a lot of success. But we've had a lot of failures, too.
What do you think those failures are?
Can I choose one?
Yeah, excuse me for a second.
I just mentioned one of the biggest failures were the big...
Oh, having to...
Huh?
I'm sure that a psychologist would be able to a psychiatrist would probably be able to really get into that subject, because I'm sure that there's something about a group that's been, and this is often said, I've heard about women too, a group that's been always subjugated. Mm-hmm. When they get into a position where they can be on top, they're treated, they like vent, they take out some of their frustrations on their own group.
Right. I had another theory, which sounds reasonable to me. One lawyer, Anglo lawyer, in a meeting in the lunch we were discussing this, he said that these are the haciendados of all. He reminded us that Mexico has a caste system that is horribly horribly discriminatory against their own people, and that it is the rich, the haciendado, who does this, and that they have always treated their Mexicans with disrespect and hatred. And he says, and it's just, they're just coming over here now. They're the haciendados. They're the bosses, and that's the reason they do it. They do it because it's natural. It comes from us, from our nature. Well, I don't know. I can't believe that either the Spanish or the Indian nature that we have permeates that or is responsible for it. I personally think that it is that is an example of some of the things. For instance, the fight that we have within ourselves to be accepted as equals by the Anglo. Let me tell you examples, for instance, as a lawyer. One of the avenues is change your name. So I tell in my book of two that are very interesting. One of them was the name of Blanco. He comes to me and he says, I want to change my name. Fine, I'm a lawyer, I'll change your name. What do you want to change? The name Blanco, what do you want? Name it, whatever you want to be, whatever you want. Well, I want to be named Blanca. Well, you take the O. Well, I changed the name, and now it became, instead of Blanco, it's a family of Blanc. And I say, neither fish nor fowl. He didn't become an American, and he didn't let go of Mexico. The second one was a man by the name of Valenzuela. And I asked him what his name, and he surprised me. He wanted to be known as, and he's in the phone book, Belancula. And I had to laugh. I said, why do you laugh? I said, well, choose another name. I don't want to tell you what to choose, but you're going to laugh at him because you're referring to one of the worst words, close to the worst words in the Spanish language, you know. So anyway, I've changed the name to Belancula. But the basis of this is that they want to be recognized as into the Anglo society, and they find that Armendariz or Lopez are names that the Anglo society recognizes without. Funny, it used to be when they want to discriminate against a black in employment, they would insist that you put a picture of it, you have a picture, because it would be John Jones, and unless he put a picture, they would know John Jones was black. But they never asked the Hispanics to put pictures. They never asked us, because we revealed ourselves by our own names, and that's and this happened, and for years and years, the blacks were asked for a picture, the Hispanics were not. So we know that they didn't need a picture for us. They could discriminate against us because of our name. And what we can do about that, I don't know, but other than to insist that we get along.
Hey, Judge Armendariz, where did you become the judge?
When President Carter came in, they moved to make some of us, judges and everything. In El Paso, Texas, we had only one Hispanic judge. His name was George Rodriguez, and he was the judge of the district court here. And he had been chosen by one of the governors, and fact is, Mary Lou and I made him a party at home as being the first one, and recognized him as the first Hispanic to reach judgeship. And there hadn't been too many more. And I was called by the President Carter's people, and first I was offered the Board of Immigration Appeals in Washington. And Mary Lou and I was in immigration, and Mary Lou and I went to Washington. And Mary Lou begged me not to take her children to Washington, because she didn't want her children raised in Washington, so I had to give that one up. Then I was called in and asked if I would be interested in the Board of Immigration. I mean, in the immigration court here. They added a third seat. When I became a judge, I accepted and became an immigration judge. I went here to the federal courthouse here in El Paso. And it was the district director who was our boss. He was the head man, in other words, the authority over us. And he had not even provided a chair for me, let alone a room or a place where a courtroom or something. And I was a federal judge making high wages. And I go there on a Monday and report to him for work. And I asked him where I go, and he didn't know how to tell me because they hadn't provided for me. I ended up in a little room next to one of the other judges. And about a week later, they disaccommodated one of the chief investigators in immigration and made him leave a room space that they gave to me. And that man hated me the rest of his life because I had taken his room. And he made it very, very clear. And I suffered an awful lot because of that, because what these people did to me, they made me quit. Maybe I retired early because I couldn't stand what they were doing.
How long were you an immigration judge?
I was an immigration judge for a little less than 8 years. But I was able to retire because of my age, my army, and my war work, and I had enough to retire, so I retired as soon as I could, because I couldn't stand the pressure. It was the pressure with, and
what did they do?
Well, and it was most of it was the Hispanic officers. Let me tell you a story, so you'll understand what I'm talking about. I'm a United States immigration judge, and I'm sitting as a judge. And they got this black Cuban in front of me. And 2 Hispanic officers testified, Border Patrol. They testify in stories that in my mind were rehearsed. They were almost alike. And they didn't come in together, they came in one at a time. They testified that they were on a hill here in El Paso, and they had high-powered 12-mile binoculars. And that on a hill in Mexico, on the Mexican side, they had seen 3 blacks sitting on a hill. Okay? Now consider, we're in Mexico, and these are 3 blacks sitting on a hill in Mexico. All right, I asked for how long. They'd been there for about an hour. And, did they do anything? No, they were just sitting there, for a hill. Okay, that was the testimony. Okay, now they say that they recognize one of the 3 as this man in front of me, who has papers as a Cuban refugee, and if I order him deported, he's going to go to prison because Castro won't accept him. And I know that, okay? And so they caught him down in downtown El Paso, the downtown plaza right across the street from where I used to sell newspapers. And they say it was 3 days later, they say that this is the same man. Now, I'm a judge, and I have a rule of law that I have to follow. And it says the evidence must be clear, consistent, unequivocal. Well, anyway, it's a rule of law. And I sit there, and I say, and I dictate my decision. The decision is that these officers are telling the truth the way they see it. I have no problem. They really believe in what they say. They really believe that they saw this man, and that this man is the same one they saw here. But I have the duty of finding all of the evidence to be consistent with only that this man is that man. And I find that there is too much room for mistake. too much room for these officers to be mistaken in their identity of this man. I'm not satisfied with the identity of the man, not with the testimony, but with the identity. And I have to have clear, convincing, and unequivocal evidence, and that's the rule. And I find that the evidence does not meet that standard, so I'm going to terminate the proceedings. He doesn't get deported. I turn around to the district attorney, the trial attorney, Mr. So-and-so, Mr. Trial Attorney, you have the right to appeal. Do you wish to appeal? I said, no, Your Honor, I don't wish to appeal. He accepted my decision. Of course, the agent accepted my decision. I said, it's a final order. And that was the end of it. In my mind, it was the end of it. About 6 months later, I get a knock on the door, on my door. And a man, I said, come in. And a man opens it, comes in. And he says to me, are you Armendariz? And I have not proud or anything, I mean, but I have a thing that says Judge Armendariz. I'm Judge Armendariz. Can I do something for you, sir? He says, I'm from Internal Affairs. I need to talk to you about a complaint. Sit down, sir. Sit down. Talk to me. He says, I have a complaint here that you called 2 officers liars. Okay? I said to him, is this complaint about something I did outside of the courtroom? Are they alleging that I call them liars outside of the courtroom? Or was it during a proceeding? Can you tell me that? I know that you can't tell me who they are, but tell me that. He says, yes, it was during a proceeding. And I said, well, sir, let me tell you. I answer to my proceedings to the Board of Immigration Appeals. Only to them. They're the only ones that have the right to review what I do. And I want you to get the hell out of here. And don't you ever come back to this list. And walked out. I never heard from him again. But this is the kind of constant prevarication and thing that I got out of the immigration during the entire time that I was there. It is just one of them. The last one was, I had a complaint, knock on the door, that my wife had a maid, a wet maid at home, which is an absolute lie. And I called the judge, the Chief Justice, and I told him, it's a lie. And I know that I can't tell, but you, as my boss, can now raise charges for somebody who's lying about one of your judges. Oh, I can't do that. I said, well, I was the chairman of the Civil Service Commission here in El Paso for 7 years, and I learned one thing, Judge. A boss that doesn't back his worker when he's right is not worth a damn. You're going to forgive me for telling you this, but I now give you a notice that I'm going to retire. I'm not going to stay here and take this shit anymore. Please fix up my retirement papers. I'm going to retire. I'm going to get out of here because I have no protection from these people, and they're not going to stop. So I got out. Now, it wasn't Anglos. I can't say it was discrimination. It can't. It wasn't discrimination that got me rid of me. It was my own people who got rid of me. Because I happen to be fair and impartial. And they don't want anyone that's fair and impartial in there. That's the way it is.
Okay, Judge.
I have deep sadness for my federal judges, my friends, because I know they're getting that kind of stuff. I know that they suffer a lot. Berta Zúñiga is one of mine. I feel very sad because I know that they're giving her hell. So that's the way it is. It's their own people, your old officers.
Let me ask you this. Going back, you sold newspapers here in El Paso downtown. How old were you when you did that, and how much money were you making?
I'm sorry?
You were selling newspapers. How old were you when you were doing that?
Yes.
And how much were you making?
How much? Oh, I mean, we made maybe 40, 50 cents a day. So, but we didn't have anything. If I needed a pair of tennis shoes, I buy my own. In other words, then I would bring part of that to my dad. I mean, part of every penny I made always went to my dad Any one of us that worked had to help the family.
Just to realize, I'm gonna ask you this one last question, and then I'll let you know, because I could sit here and I would love to talk to you several more interviews. Maybe if I can come back, I'd like to write something else. But El Paso, with as large a Hispanic population as it has, why is it that it took Raymond Diaz so long to get elected mayor? And why is it that there was still problems in the 1960s that there were hardly any Hispanic police officers and bomberos? Why is that? Why was there a lack of power?
We have a tremendous lack of unity.
Yeah, hang on a second.
Sorry about that.
We have
Because this is going to be very interesting now that the is translated.
Oh, I would answer this by telling you. Can I still go?
Yeah.
By telling you, when I make a speech, I have a very, very common joke that I tell to express my concern about this point. I tell the man another story about this man that had a whole pocket of a whole bucket of spiders, and he would poke at him. And about the time he killed a few, more were born. And then the story about the men who are over here at the camp. And there's two camps. One of them has a roof on it, and the other one doesn't. And somebody asks, why does this one have? Says, we always have the non-Mexicans because we have to put them on the roof or they're going to escape. Well, what about the Mexicans? Oh, no. Says one of them tries to get over the fence, the others pull him down. We are not a people that has learned to protect each other in a distinguished and unselfish way. We are not a people that are close to each other, and we should be, because we talk about the Anglo and the others getting along with us. And first, we've got to learn the duty of getting along with each other. We have to learn that we are a class that the Supreme Court of the United States called a separate and distinct class within a class of white people. But we have special distinguishing characteristics. And one of them is the inability to work with each other. We are so selfish. We are such a selfish group. It's our own fault. 90% of what happens to us in the American society is our own fault. 90% of the discrimination that we suffer is through our own people. If we ever got rid of that, if you youngsters would think and work towards unity of your own people, you can conquer this country. You can be the leaders. And one day you're going to have a great president of the United States named Muñoz or Sepúlveda or Armendariz. There's no doubt in my mind that before you do it, you're going to have to learn how to get along with each other. Learn to do your duty before you exert your rights in this country. And your duty to each other is to be Hispanic. LULAC says, honor your ancestry and maintain it immaculate. What do they say? You've got to act right in this country. You can't be a bunch of criminals and dopesters and everything else. You have to act right. You have to act for each other. You have to act together. What can I say? At 81, with the experience that I have, 50 years of working for these people, of trying to get them up the ladder of success, what is it I have to come back? And most of the blame is our own. Most of the blame is ours. We can't have people not backing other people and we can't be fighting each other. And I don't mean just in politics. I mean, today we have three people who want to be the mayor of El Paso. 3 of them. Very, very good. All of them excellent people. Talk good about them, not bad. Talk good, because they're all good. And then go out and vote, and may the best one win. Hopefully, the Anglo won't beat him. I don't know. But that's probably what's going to happen. But we have that problem, because the 3 are going to fight so much with each other that everybody's going to stay home on election day, and who wins? And this is what happens. This is the history that we have, and it's reflected in LULAC. In LULAC history, it's reflected. And some of the things that we do to each other. I wrote in the LULAC News in 1993, when I was national president, an article where I said, what we do to each other never reaches the height. I mean, what the Anglo does to us never reaches the height and the viciousness of what we do to each other. And that is a truth that still is today. We have to learn how to protect each other. And we have to stop this CS. If it's the caste system that has come into the United States, we've got to beat it. We've got to fight it. We are not haciendados here. We are American citizens who deserve a share of this society and who must get together and work together to achieve that. And that's what we are.
Okay. Judge Armendariz, thank you so much for taking time to be with us today.
Well, I thank you for the opportunity, and I'm sorry that I talk so much, but this is a very dear subject to me, and I want to get it all down. Wish I could have some more time, but that's all.
Thank you very much.